In this video, I'm doing an interesting comparison between the Citroën GS and the GSA. Let's take a closer look. Now, before we dive into this one, I must just say neither of these cars are quite how they left the factory. This is a GS Special, which was the bottom of the range. This was a GSA Special. Both have been meddled around with to a certain degree. Both have the later 1299cc engine and 5-speed gearbox. So mostly we're going to be talking about the cosmetic differences between the two cars. Citroën GS was launched in 1970 to much acclaim. Hydro pneumatic suspension, an all new alloy 4-cylinder boxer engine, and yeah, a great handling dynamics, pretty much like nothing else. In 1979 GS became GSA, and as you can see, we've certainly got some changes going on at the front. We've still got these amazing trapezoidal headlamps, but the trim around the indicators is now black. There's a slightly different grille, generally more plastic on the later car, which also has these interesting little chin spoilers, a separate one each side, but we've still got a gap there for a starting handle, so we can still start the car by hand if we so wish, which was pretty rare for the 1980s. Other changes we can see cosmetically are door handles. The GS uses these sort of door handles where the lever goes in, whereas the GSA, again, much more plasticky. It also means you can't swap doors between GS and GSA. A little pull clip like so. Under the bonnet, there weren't too many changes. The GS started with a 1015cc flat 4 engine, but soon people were demanding more power. So there was an 1129cc, a 1222cc, and finally the 1299cc engine, which I think came in towards the end of GS production on the X3. The biggest change is probably at the back, so let's go there. Now, when the GS was launched, hatchbacks weren't all that common. The Austin Maxi was in production, but generally a lot of cars were saloons, and the GS is no exception. So the rear window is fixed, and we've got this little hinged boot down here. It actually takes the entire bumper with it, and that flap lifts up, and you've got a surprisingly useful, surprisingly large boot, but a completely flat entry point, just like the Estate. By comparison, I must say the GSA lost a certain amount of grace. The GS, especially when it had the earlier pre-78 cathedral rear lights, a very pretty car, I think. This isn't quite as graceful, but we do have a tailgate which lifts up, and once you've dealt with this really annoying, mostly broken parcel shelf, not their best design, you've got again a very deep, very spacious boot, which is now much easier to access. We've lost the flat entry point because otherwise it's just too big an opening. It gets difficult to keep some strength in the structure of the car, especially as the rear seat folds forward to give you even more space. But yeah, very, very practical, just slightly ruined by a stupid parcel shelf. I think it was originally meant to retract, but why didn't it just have a simple lift up parcel shelf like most cars? I've no idea. The other major change is inside. This is a right-hand drive GS, so it has this kit car-esque binnacle. That was actually a production change for right-hand drive. They thought the quirky, more individual dashboard of the French models would be too much for the British to bear. And even early GSAs still used this design because I think they hadn't quite got the right-hand drive ones ready for production when right-hand drive sales started in 1980. Indicators are right, oddly, for a Continental car, and we've got a flasher and a horn, depending which way you go. I think it's pushing for flash, is it? Or maybe it's push out. But yeah, we've got wipers over this side, and all GSs and GSAs had a left-hand drive wiper pattern. That was true of all of them. One curiosity on the GS is you have separate fans for cold and hot, and for maximum blowage you put both blowers on, single speed fans unfortunately, and again you can mix the blend with cold and hot here. There are face level vents. I think those just bring fresh air in. Center console is slightly different. The indicators hidden down here, Very slow tick on this one. A very noisy clock also. And it's a 5-speed gearbox. You have to push down to get reverse, which led to some embarrassment this morning because I couldn't find it. The stereo would be here, but on both cars we're entirely missing it. That's the height control lever in the same place, but not really any stowage space here on the passenger side of the GS. Now the GSA dashboard is very, very different. I've added a steering wheel cover partly to try and protect the rather fragile rim, and also because it just gives a bit more grip because it's manual unassisted steering. But yeah, we've got this utterly bonkers rotating dial dashboard, this graphic display to show you where the things are, the satellite controls to show you how to operate the wipers, the lights, the indicators are on a rocker here, the horn is now behind here and sounds much the same. Haven't got the ignition on. There we go, exactly the same horn. And we've also got the headlamp flasher is now on the bottom here. Still got the handle for the handbrake, but the heater control is much simplified. Hot, cold, the amount of blow, and it's one fan now, and then whether you want it on the windscreen or the feet. A very fine hat on display. We've even got a little glove box here and a stowage tray. Not that it's much use because stuff just goes flying off on top there, but you could perhaps rest a baguette there if you so wished. And again, we've got fresh air vents, very, very good fresh air vents, blow a lot of air at the face. We've still got the same ignition key mounting way down there, which is slightly annoying, but the controls fall much more sweetly to hand in this car. We've got hazard lights here, proper tick, fog light, that's an econometer which I don't think works on this car, and a heated rear window. 5-speed gearbox. We've got no detent to prevent accidental selection of reverse, but you don't very often go from fifth to reverse, so that's absolutely fine. Additional vents here, these can be hot or cold. So we will have a look in the engine bay, but there's really not a fat lot of difference, especially as this is a later engine. One change that I think might apply is the GSA moved to a breakerless ignition, much more reliable than the old points and condenser. I've had absolutely no bother with this car at all, but both cars have the spare wheel mounted in the engine bay, and like I say, both cars can actually be started on the starting handle. But yeah, an engine bay unlike most cars, because you've got the hydro pneumatic spheres here. It's the LHM reservoir, so the LHM system controls the suspension and the brakes. The brakes are formidable in both. And when it comes to driving impressions, I haven't got time to take these pair out. I have actually driven that one briefly this morning. Much the same. This one has a slightly different exhaust on it, so it's slightly rortier, but otherwise they are, you know, fundamentally the same car. There is no difference in the driving dynamics, and they're both very distinctive, as you can see, because I've done plenty of videos driving my GSA all over the place. We're currently in the middle of what's probably going to be a 700-mile road trip to the east coast of England and back to Wales. So yeah, there you go. It's just a look at some of the differences between GS and GSA. Just before I go, one more thing about the rear on the estates. The estate didn't change between GS and GSA, so you still had the same flat floor, the same flat floor rather, the same bumper that went up with the tailgate. So that's one change, but didn't change. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found that interesting, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Farewell.